Welcome to the Discovering Your Balance podcast with your hosts Carla and Andrew. We provide balancers with resources for senior care and answers to your questions about aging. Sponsored by Home Care Partners.
Hi everyone, this is Andrew with Home Care Partners, and I want to welcome you to our very first podcast. One of the things we're going to start out today with our podcast is talking about who is a balancer and how did Carla and I come up with the idea and why this is important to us. Our audience often is, if you look at our logo, a person that's balancing multiple generations within their family. So we talk a lot about work-life balance, and Carla and I and Christine, in our long careers that we've had of balancing our own families and our work, but balancing this multi-generational group is really interesting to us. Myself, when I think of my balancer story and how this is important to me, my family, about the mid-90s, my grandfather moved in with us from out of state. So I got to see my parents at a pretty young age, in their mid-30s, be caregivers for him. And I think really in the mid-90s, there weren't a lot of senior care experts, and a lot of home care really wasn't well known. So they're really kind of doing things on their own, which I think for someone, when we talk about the topics that we're going to go through in this podcast, it's still possible to do that, but there's a lot of experts around that you get to know in the senior industry. They lived in rural Nebraska, which made that even more difficult, but kind of seeing them balancing, they had a business, taking care of their parents, had really young kids. I think my younger sister was about 2 years old at the time. So really broad range of ages. And then as another grandparent, about 10, 15 years after that, had some health issues. Then I got to see more of what the healthcare continuum would look like in a home, and how can you reach out to resources to get the help, because my grandmother, after a surgery, needed help all the time during the day. So my parents are very great caregivers, but it's just not something that they could do and continue to run their lives and take care of their families in that way. So I got to see, skilled nursing come in and help my grandmother, private duty aides come and help her. And I got to see what the difference in the outcome was like when I had a family member moving in and my parents caring for a grandfather, and how stressful that is without help. And, when you bring in a little bit of help, especially for my father, who was really close to my grandmother, loved her so much, great caregiver, but the things that she needed help with just weren't necessarily things that he was great at. It let him be the son, do the things that he was good at, and just have a better balance in his own life of caring for his mom. So that's just a little bit of my balancer story and what that looks like. And I think as we talk about the term balancer, and Carla will go into that a little bit, but it doesn't necessarily have to be one single age group. Carla and I were really talking about the sandwich generation, and now with people living older and some people having kids older, a club sandwich generation where it creates this, multi-generations. And we've helped families where grandparents are taking care of their grandkids while still having their health issues. And sometimes that comes into our care plan and they're around and all those things. So it's really unique. It's really interesting. And I think our audience can connect with that. We're not going into the realm of work-life balance, but in order to have that type of balance and focus on other things that you want to do in your life, how can we help provide resources, talk about things to do as you're balancing those multiple generations?
Great. Yeah, as Andrew mentioned, so the audience that we're really going to be speaking to today is that balancer. And that individual is simultaneously balancing roles of maybe being a parent themselves, caring for either a father or a mother or maybe a grandparent, while working in their professional career. And so they're really juggling a lot of things. So we're going to be visiting with individuals like Christine, who both provide support and can relate to those emotional aspects of being in the role themselves, and also supporting balancers every day. And And that feeling we're going to talk about, that there's never enough time in the day to get everything done. So we're going to be providing resources through these podcasts and providing balancing strategies to help better prepare you, the audience, you're the balancer, for what that journey might look like ahead. So at Home Care Partners of Nebraska, we support the balancer by providing peace of mind so that you know that your loved one is happy, they're healthy, they're safe. And we do that in a variety of different ways. And that might be the day-to-day activities. But most importantly, what we're finding from feedback is really that communication and that peace of mind that you get knowing that even though maybe you're not local, maybe you're remote, you live in a different town, you feel involved, you feel confident that if there's a health concern, that this organization that's taking care of your loved one is going to be able to communicate that with you. And also possibly you have access to charting notes so you can read that real time and really participate in the care, even though you might be, again, balancing multiple things and not have time to be a 24/7 caregiver. So with that being said, as Andrew mentioned, one of the things that we often do is bring in resources. So there's a lot of day-to-day needs that someone might have. And oftentimes, if there's something that we don't necessarily provide, we will find a professional that we know, that we trust, that does a great job, like Bridge to Better Living, and bring you in to help and support that balancer. So, Chris, will you tell us what Bridge to Better Living does and what's your role?
Absolutely. Bridge to Better Living assists seniors and their family members to relocate and find the best fit for independent living, assisted living, memory support, and long-term care. We are no cost to the senior and family, and so seniors really love that idea and embrace that idea. And so that's what we do. So to sum it up, we're advocates, we're navigators, we're just a bundle of resources that we support the senior and family with. My role is the Director of Development. I was onboarded about a year ago with Bridge to Better Living, and I've loved every minute of it. We are now a franchise company, so that's effective February of 2019. And so my role is as a developer for Bridge to Better Living.
Great.
Yeah.
Congratulations on that. I know there's a lot that went
One of the things that I'm excited about, the ways that we work together and what that means is helping out someone and a family
Absolutely.
that's having a hard time. And one of the things that I see the most and hear the most is somebody doesn't want to move. In an odd thing, before Carla and I were working on this business, senior living was something that I championed. So many people are scared to transition and worried about what it will be like. And I would bring up that conversation a lot of time and talk to people what they thought aging and retirement looked like for them. A lot of negativity. So when people are saying, I would rather die before I would move into a community, I think, they're thinking about maybe their grandparents that I saw. And even in the age when I would see my great-grandparents maybe living in a community, you kind of get this institutional feel that's block walls and really scary. So, now when someone still has that view, and we've had people that have reached out to us, we're oftentimes that first call for a balancer to say, hey, I really need some help. When we're talking to them and finding out what they need, and sometimes, they're sharing with us, they would not ever want to move to a community. But we've passed some of those folks along to you and said, why don't you take a few tours with this group that really understands the industry and can show you some great options? And so when that is something that somebody's looking for, I'm glad that you help them and make them feel better in those ways that it doesn't have to be as scary. When we just talk about what does aging look like, I think there's some really cool places. So for us being in the senior industry, I think it's really neat because we get to plan out those golden years a little bit differently and know more about what we want. It's not scary. So thanks for doing that. That's really a mission. And I think that means a lot because so many people, even starting in their 50s, are just...
I think you're right, Andrew. I think with the senior industry, it's all about collaboration, and there's so much synergy within the senior healthcare industry, and it needs to be synergized. It needs to be a caring attitude, and so it's what's best for the senior and their family. And so if that means they might come to Bridge to Better Living, and really home care might be an option for them for the next 6 months to a year before they make some decisions, or maybe for 5 years from down the road, then that's whatever's best for the senior is what we want. And we appreciate the opportunity to collaborate with home care partners.
Thank you, Chris.
You're welcome.
Andrew makes a really good point that no doubt about it that this industry very well. But what you're also wonderful at is connecting with people. And I know you've shared a little bit about your story with me, but if you wouldn't mind sharing with our audience, just reflecting back to when you were the balancer yourself, what was that experience like, and how do you use that to connect with the balancer you're talking with today?
Yeah, what Carla's referring to is when I was a balancer, it was about 2005, so it's been a few years ago, and I have a sister and 2 brothers, but it was my father that was having some issues. It was heart disease. Now, we were fortunate enough that he lived in Hastings, so it was, pretty easy to get to Dad. He was actually still working too, so that had a whole nother dynamic layer to it, because he wanted to continue to be behind his desk and be with people and thrive, and his body was just not allowing him to do that. But I remember how all of us as kids had to take our roles. And I think what I did there is we orchestrated those roles. So my sister was more of the drive down Interstate 80, head west. I need to help Dad, clean the house, get groceries for the next several weeks, do his laundry. Then what my role was to help Dad set up medical care, do his insurance work, do his, his home book work, things of that nature. And then basically my sister and I, we just orchestrated the boys, because sometimes they just need that little push. And then they did what they needed to do as well for Dad. So it was a time that was intense. It was a time that was stressful. And Balancer's definitely what it was, because I had, I believe, a 5th grader and a 7th grader at home. We were in a new house, trying to adapt to that and being pulled in all those different ways. Trying to have my career, trying to take care of Dad, make sure the kids were good. And it was a stressful time. And so when I look back on that, I'm happy it's over, but I think from that experience, I've been able to then connect, like Carla said, relate to people, and help them navigate certainly a very complex senior healthcare industry. So if you kind of peel back that onion a little bit, it's our job to make it not so complex, obviously. And so that was my journey, and with my father as being a balancer in that sandwich generation.
I'm glad that you brought up roles. Carla and I are dealing with different family members that are having those different roles. And we also teach classes preparing to be a caregiver. And it's for a person that's a balancer, and sometimes someone that is planning for their own retirement and aging, and they're thinking of what are the roles of their children, because those are all going to be very different. It's good to have those roles known in advance. I think one of the things that we see within those different roles and the way that we work with them and communicate with them is what's important to each. How do we support them all individually, and knowing, when we know what's important to those kids that are maybe caring for their parents and want to know what's going on, staying in touch with them, getting into our electronic system to see what's going on with their parents. And I think that's important for a couple different reasons, because, if somebody, a kid that lives close is caring for their parent, they're really involved in that day to day. So they might get into our care system twice a day. They might get in there at lunch to see how did mom or dad's morning go, and they'll get in there overnight because they're just that ingrained and they know routines, and they're also really interested to hear, we're providing great care, but what are the things that we're doing that are really elevating mom or dad's life? They find out that we get to know them extremely well. They're doing, we're out and about doing as many activities as we can. So they kind of get a sense that home care is different than what they expected.
I like that component. We've talked a little bit about that in your software and their ability to go in real time and to find out exactly what is going on. And that certainly helps them be proactive as well and get ahead of the problem if there is one. And so that's nice for them. That's a great asset. And
sometimes those other roles are other kids that maybe are living farther away and live out of state and have different roles. And then we might have some concerns. We might say we need to bring in some other healthcare partners to help with your parents, or they might need to make a move to be safe, or we might have to make some home modifications or some of those other things, but there's a little bit of an ask there. And so for those kids that don't really know, when you're farther away, you don't know your parents aren't doing as well as they actually are. So when Carla and I are having different family meetings and we're kind of going through those charting notes with them and kind of asking them to be partners and engaged in their parents is really eye-opening to them to see that they're not doing as well. We've had multiple family members when they come in from out of state and they haven't seen mom or dad in 6 months or a year. They're like, wow, this is very different. And I'm sure that also comes to you because, Carla, I think part of what we're really interested in is, when's the time to do some of that?
We get pretty busy, I think, in the senior healthcare industry after like the holidays. So after Thanksgiving, after Christmas, because that's exactly, Andrew, when those kids might be coming in from out of state, seeing mom or dad, and they realize, wow, there's been a huge difference from my last visit. And my last visit might have been just 9 months ago to a year, but now I'm seeing a lot of changes. I'm seeing changes around the house. They're just maybe not having the detail that they used to have. Maybe that's vision problems. Maybe that's, other issues that they might be experiencing. And so then I think that's when it's very helpful that they reach out and start that process immediately versus just letting it get worse. And I think that's helpful. Yeah. But it really is a lot after the holidays. The phone starts to kind of ring and people need that support and that navigation.
I like, Chris, that you mentioned some of those signs to look for. So, is the house being kept up? Are there healthcare declines? You mentioned vision, that sort of thing. Any other signs that you would say as for the balancer, hey, the next time you visit with mom or dad, keep an eye out for these sort of things, because that would really prompt you to maybe start doing some research. Any other kind of signs you can think of that you would?
Yeah, I think overall, just like the household and how that's being kept, and certainly I think they need to realize, if they never kept a good house in the first place and it's still the same way, well, you probably don't have any problems. But if they were immaculate individuals and it's starting to see a decline, then just nutritionally, how are they doing? When you open up the refrigerator, what does that look like? Have they maybe not been grocery shopping? So that's a sign that they're probably not eating well, or maybe they're eating out a little bit more.
I bet you see people not eating well when their spouse passes. That's a common time, right?
Do. Absolutely, because what do you like to do? You like to eat together, you like to socialize, you like to have, convivium, you want to talk. And then that absolutely is problematic.
Time to keep an eye out on someone when their spouse passes away and make sure you're even checking in more frequently than you normally would and spending that time with them.
Isolation can occur. You bet. They start, withdrawing a little bit. But then on the other side, you might see a flip that they kind of come out of the box a little bit. We've seen that as well, too.
Well, if they've been a caregiver.
Right. If they've been a caregiver and they have been tired and they haven't been able to do really those things that provide enjoyment to themselves, then that can be not a positive, but it can get them out and more social.
You can see a little boost Depends
little
at
boost
maybe
is a good
depends
way to
at what
put it.
age and what their prior years were like. If they were a 24-hour caregiver, that weighs on you a lot.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
I think playing into that is sometimes self-care, and that's while you're a caregiver and maybe after you're a caregiver, but whether you're thinking about when you were in those roles as you were the balancer, or just advice that you would give to somebody now who's in that role, what sort of advice would you give on making sure that we're taking care of ourselves so that we can better take care of somebody else? Do you see that often, that we're neglecting?
Absolutely. And I think that's the biggest thing for the balancer is there is neglect for themselves. They are putting all their efforts into taking care of aging parents and their children, and then there's not much left in the tank for themselves. And so there's easy fixes to that, and they just need to reach out, find a care manager, find a navigator, find someone that can help them. So maybe that's home care partners a couple hours during the day to take care of their aging parents so that they can go to a soccer game and feel relaxed and enjoy the soccer game of their child. Maybe that's getting a babysitter for the child so that they can then spend a couple quality hours with mom and dad trying to just be a son or daughter, just being a son or daughter, not a caregiver, not a balancer, just being who they are. So use resources.
That's maybe a time to sit and reflect. If, we've got a listener that is a balancer and you've got a busy family life, think of, when have I been able to make the time to sit down with my parents or grandparents and have coffee and talk to them? Not in the scenarios where I'm over helping them out doing housework or doing some of those other things, but quality time.
Right. Just I have a great example.
Because when you think of that as you've been a balancer, it's probably really tough.
Last night, actually, Andrew, I met with a family I've been supporting for about 6 months now. Mom and dad are not wanting to make the transition. The son and daughter-in-law are really saying it's time. And they're just really hesitant. And they were so heavy-hearted around the boardroom. And I just said to his dad, I said, what is it? What do you need? What do you need? And he just sat there and he goes, I need my son. I just need my son. And, not to talk about moving, not to talk about adding care into the home, just I need my son just to be him and just to visit. And I saw the son then, and he kind of had a tear in his eye, and he knew then. Yeah. And it was just a really good moment, and those moments happen all the time for us. Yeah. So.
Well, one of the things, we want to share about maybe some more of those specific stories, because when people call us, or if they call you, they really see us as mainly helping out the parent, or, that's really the product. But we want to learn more about, what are the other ways that we're supporting that balancer, and why do they reach out to resources before they get burnt out, and what do they receive when they do a great job doing that? Some of the things that they may be helping their parents with are great fits for them within those separate roles. And there's just such a broad range of things that they could be reaching out to get help on. So that way they know their parents are doing okay. It just varies at different points in their life. But anything, what things can you think of that in what we do supports the balancer because it's supporting their parents?
I think what we do, and I think what I heard, Andrew, was you were talking a little bit about maybe being proactive in that balancing act. When individuals are proactive instead of that reactive mode, it's going to help them in the long run. So we have many initiatives in senior healthcare to be proactive. It's going to help, I think, in overall quality. When you have the ability to really kind of lay it out on the table, spend months on it, due diligence, do interviews, things of that nature, you're going to have more quality. And that's what we all want for our aging parents. The outcomes are going to be better.
So do you say more quality because they get more of a choice? It's not this emergency, and
Correct.
we just have to find somebody
It's
that's
not
going to
that
take
reactive.
you today. And maybe that's similar that's similar in our industry as well with home care. If you have an emergency and it's something that's needed today and somebody needs 24-hour care, immediately to call any company to do that and get it set up is really hard. But planning ahead, you get to make the choices. That makes sense. Okay.
You get to have a better realm of choices, and you're going to be able to use the providers, use the agencies, the living communities that you want to use. And so if we wait too long, everything seems to be in a reactive mode, and they might not get their top choice.
Yeah, when I think of the dynamic between parents and kids and how that works sometimes, especially if somebody's a little bit hesitant to move, if they didn't plan ahead, well, they went to somewhere that wasn't their top choice. I'm thinking of what that move-in process looks like and what that interaction goes like with the kids. They're complaining, this isn't where I want to be. I want to move back home because I don't want to be here. This wasn't my first, what else would you say about that? For the kids too, it's very difficult. We've seen, those kind of commercials of how do you start the conversation with your family? And when you start that conversation with your family, some of that helps you with your own planning. But what are some situations where you've heard of somebody didn't get into the top choice community and it just didn't go well because of that? And then the family, the kids are continuing to hold on to all these extra things that they need to do because of this.
Well, it has happened. So I think what we see maybe a little bit is they might wait. They might put a deposit down for their top living community, and they're going to wait. They're going to wait for the right view, the right first floor versus third floor. But sometimes people have to react, and they kind of have to take second or third choice, and that is problematic. So they just never seem to maybe settle in quite as well or as fast, maybe have more complaints, maybe they talk and say the food isn't what I thought it would be, or things of that nature, or the housekeeping isn't as good as I wanted it to be. And I think they just are maybe a little bit more negative on it before they kind of settle into it. And some people might move. Some people are like, I've experienced it. I might move home. Maybe home care is what I would like to maybe experience, to move back into a living community.
It really sounds like, I like the examples that you're talking about, maybe a couple that is really specific. They've known, throughout their life, they've got to make choices, and that's important to them. So when someone's saying they want a certain view or they want different things, like they've got a vision and they know what they want. And I can relate to that personally. I want to have my own choices. With home care, I think there's still a lot of people that don't know about home care. They think of if mom and dad are going to have a better outcome, and this is the place that they picked out with this corner, and it's a little bit bigger apartment maybe, that's what they're envisioning. If they could have home care and they needed it for a couple months or something like that to make sure that they're getting into the place that they chose instead of that second choice or something that the kids are choosing, sounds like an option for a better outcome.
It's a viable option, you bet, to get their first choice, to add some home care in there, non-medical, take care of them a little bit, develop a relationship.
Yeah.
I think that's great. So if they're kind of in the midst of, they know they need to move, have somebody that is there to maybe help sort through some of their things and kind of get them mentally prepared for the move. And then maybe 9 times out of 10, hey, they want to bring that caregiver with them for a while to get them settled, to get them acclimated.
Well, and Chris, another thing that I love about what you're saying is the feeling of control. And when we think back again to our audience that we're speaking to, this balancer, when mom or dad is telling me, hey, Carla, here's what I would like. And I've got this plan, I've got this vision, I'd like to share that with you. Oh, wouldn't that just be the best gift that you could ever give me? Because that's a really stressful role. We have a lot of families that that balancer is feeling a lot of guilt. Because they're maybe having to influence decisions because they feel like they have to, or because they feel like, I don't know, mom or dad never never really told me.
And they're thinking, is this the right choice? Because we don't know what they want.
Yeah. And so when someone is being proactive, like you said, what is that difference that you're seeing in that balance or the family dynamics and that stress that they're carrying? That's got to be pretty obvious.
It's much less stress-free. It's more open in communication. It's more relaxed, less anxiety, and just more like, we can do this. It's going to work. We can make this happen, versus it being hurried and more reactive and just, not that we can't do that. I think all of us in the senior industry do that and do it well. We know how to do it on the reactive side, on the crisis side, but certainly it makes our jobs a lot more easy when it is more proactive in nature. Yeah. But I think it just takes the stress down. It just takes the stress down when you're proactive. And it'll be interesting to see what our generation does with telling our story and how we want, to proceed with that, because
I bet we're all going to have, we are going to have really high standards.
We will have
and we'll have certain things that we're looking for. An example that I think of how did we support a balancer through a move and someone through, how do I find that right community? We were helping someone at their home for a while, and they were wanting to move into a community, and we continued to help her after she moved into her community. But one of the things I think is really special about what we do is, the difference between what a family might expect us to do when we start service and what they actually receive. For this client, when she moved in, was having a really tough time. She wasn't quite ready. She didn't know that she needed to be there, but she did, and we continued to help her. She had a beautiful home. She's got a dog she's really close to. All these things, a lot of changes. You're sleeping in a different bed. But she got to have those same caregivers that she was used to, and she's really close to them. They are close relationships to her, and she's got some personal connections to them, which is really great. One of the days, maybe a week, 10 days after she moved in, was over visiting her during coffee in the morning. And I see our team member had taken all of her different floral arrangements that she received and took them apart, and they were all out on the counter. I'm not a floral person. I would mess this up. So a thing that I love about our team having different strengths is that when they're in helping, they're doing different things. But she knows what she's doing. She takes all the different parts out of the floral arrangement. She's snipping the bottoms off, making sure that they're accepting water, being able to pluck these little parts of the flowers off. And so when you think about why is that what we're doing, that caregiver knows who she is, knows she's having a difficult transition, knows these floral arrangements are from her family, knows that this makes her new apartment feel like home. The easy thing to do is to say, these are not doing well, these flowers. I need to get rid of these so she doesn't have to look at flowers that are dying. But that level of care, because we know who that client is, what's important to them, that was a really special day. So I, just came out and asked her, we were having a great conversation, and I said, did you think home care is different than what you expected it to be? And she said, definitely.
Absolutely.
That made me really happy.
I bet that was a good day.
Oh, that was a great
it's
day.
Just the attention to detail. So that caregiver just, superb with the attention to detail and what makes the client happy, what makes her happy, what did she need, and just having, I think, that anticipation of what she needs. And it might be as simple as rearranging those flowers so they last longer, so she remembers that the family sent them. That makes her day more bright. But it's, I think as we train caregivers in the home or in living communities, it's just that we need to teach them the customer service of how to anticipate what that senior needs.
Well, that training that we do in the hiring process is person-centered care. From our interviews and hiring and training and everything. And when Carla's interviewing families that we serve, what's important to them and involving a senior in their own care. That's person-centered care, finding out what's important, because it's really easy to go in and help someone get ready for the day and make sure that they're getting their lunch and those things.
Right.
But person-centered care is very difficult because you have to know someone well enough to care for them in those emotional ways and know the things that are important that keep someone happy. So I think, in a scenario like that, and that family that we serve, family members living in different places see that within our team, see that within the way Carla and I help them out, helped with that transition, which was really neat.
It's great to see it. I mean, it just makes your heart feel good when it is maximized to that level. It does. It just makes
and
you
you're
feel
empathetic
like
because you're thinking of, I know who this person is, and I know how they're feeling, and what are all of the ways, whatever the stage of someone's life is that we can help them. You just relate to that. You think of, a lot of times when I sit down with someone, with a family, if we're just having coffee, it feels like someone in my own family. It feels like it could be my grandparent or my parent. So I'd love to just share their stories, and I think that's when they are working with us, they feel it's a really good relationship, a personal thing. We care about them.
It's all about connection.
Yeah.
We talked a little bit about that yesterday, Carla. We talked about the connection it takes with people to really get, centric with them. And that's a gift. I think that is a gift. Not everybody does that well, but when you can connect, it works out better.
Well, and
whatever care situation.
What's interesting is it is so important to find out, what is someone's goals or what's important to them. And you mentioned earlier, Chris, our generation. And, I'm curious to ask you in regards to, I know you've helped so many families through a variety of different transitions in your previous careers and in your current career. And, what would you say that looks like as far as what the senior themselves is looking for and what's really important to them versus possibly what this balancer, maybe their adult child or their power of attorney, what questions are they asking and what's important to them? What are some of those generational differences that you're seeing? And how would you just guide or give advice to this balancer to say, just be aware that?
That's a good question, and I think too, we talk about generations, but I think what we see sometimes, and I'm sure you do too, is you might have siblings, and so you might have a son that is thinking in a different mode than the daughter.
Sure.
So the daughter on the tour definitely needs, ABC, and they need to see that on the tour, and it needs to be demonstrated on the tour that we might go to, where the son might be looking at all different venues of what would be needed out of a senior living community. And then you have mom and dad's view of what they want.
Right.
And so it's trying to collaborate with them to try to get glimpses of all of it to find the right fit then. And what we hear so often, Carla, is after we sit down and we're comparing all the living communities, they generally like something about each community. And often they say, we wish we could just build our own community and take that amenity from that particular community and put it with this community. And so it is difficult. It is trying to drill down what is the most important. And so sometimes you just have to do the drill down questions with everybody involved to find out what's important and then prioritize it. And that takes practice and that takes work. But
a thing that I think can happen accidentally is that you would make a mistake. If you've got the kids there and they have different things that they're interested in and they are kind of pushing a family to make a transition and their parents may be quiet, is to be speaking to those kids because you think, they're the decision maker, they're asking all of the questions, but not involving the person that's getting care or moving or those things into that conversation. That would be difficult.
Sometimes it's mediation, and mediation almost to the extent that it's not like a angry mediation at all, but it's just trying to get maybe the son and daughter to realize that dad was just trying to talk, and to kind of shut down son or daughter so dad then can express his feelings of what needs to be said. And so a lot of it is almost counseling, so to speak.
Yeah, a question that I have about that when I think of it is, what do you think the longest meeting that you've had like that is? Carla and I, when we're meeting with multiple family members and we're really, kind of trying to assess the level of someone's need and what's important to them, and hearing from all the kids that have come in for this family meeting. I mean, we've been in a meeting like that for about 4 hours before.
It can be. It definitely can be 3 to 4 hours.
And I bet those kids come out of it being really just emotionally drained.
They are emotionally drained, but they generally come out of it and it's just like a weight has been lifted from them, because they are anxious. They are, kind of excited that this consultation's going to happen, where we talk about socially what they need, medically what they present at, physically what they can do for themselves. So I like to concentrate on what mom and dad can do for themselves versus what they can't do, and that seems to work well. And then a financial component as well too. But sitting around that table, and then when they start to see that this is doable. You are the expert on the other side of the table. You're navigating it. You're directing it. You have care. You have compassion, knowledge. It's like a weight when they leave, and generally we get a hug out of it. So that's kind of
right.
fun too.
I mean those meetings are tough, and when we're in there too, we kind of have to break through all these things to get to what are you actually going to do and what do you need here. When you get those size, and you can see happens maybe at a little bit different point for each of those different family members, when they're okay, we've talked about the need that I have to have met, and I feel comfortable now. And this is just the planning and proactive part of it. If you're behind it, they're really anxious and nervous about it. And just our company, who we are, Home Care Partners, the partners part of that, when we're working with those families, we incorporate that, and we say, I'm glad that you're feeling better, and we are glad to partner with you to help take care of your parents, so that way they know, okay, I feel, just as a balancer, I felt this weight on my own. And sometimes if you're that one role that's the closest, and your other siblings are out of town and they don't know what's going on, you've maybe been a year or two of this really heavy weight. That is just a big weight lifted off your shoulders. It's like, okay, we've got a professional that can help us. Those kinds of things. So I do love when you get that reaction and that side, because you're making a difference. It's the start of, okay, we've had some tough days and we're moving into better days. Yeah, and that's great to do together.
It gives them light at the end of the tunnel. It gives them a relief. It's a supporting, they feel supported.
Well, and sometimes you're right, you see that weight being lifted, right? Not only possibly verbally, but also maybe some nonverbal language where someone's just taking deep breath, or those sort of things, or, their facial expressions. And what's interesting is sometimes their parent, mom or dad, might not have even realized how much their health, their well-being, their home safety is keeping you up at night, And so sometimes it's very eye-opening to say, gosh, I didn't realize this was affecting you in this way. Or on the flip side, you'll hear, and I won't necessarily hear one of my families say this to their children, but, they might say, I just don't want to be a burden on anybody. And that's just their feeling like, I want to make my own decisions. And I know maybe I'm seeing that stress that you're under with my health, or with your career, or with caring for your family. And so when you think about that, just being aware of that, what sort of stresses can you personally relate to, or have you seen that balancer is going through, and kind of realizing those stresses what would be resources that you would recommend?
Oh, absolutely. Getting help, seeking help. I think you want to get an expert in the senior healthcare industry. You want to get a care navigator or a case manager, or one of us. You call one of us. You need to find that connected person that you feel comfortable with, that you want to work with, and that you want to sustain that relationship with them. And so I think we are both two very great companies that do it and do it well. And it just starts with a phone call. And it's very easy. Start with a phone call, meet with us, and then it kind of just blossoms from there. But don't go without it, because it just becomes more stressful. It just becomes more a tenuous situation. But just reach out and get the support. Absolutely.
I love that because sometimes it's just, where do I start?
Where do I start? That's right. And that's why some of those consultations can last 4 hours, because it's just all these questions from years that just develop and need to be asked and be put on the table.
Mm-hmm. A thing that I would encourage our audience to do is when you're having a conversation with a friend or family member or someone that starts to talk about their own situation and their stress, is to figure out, how do I personally give that person permission to get the help that they need? Because I get this a lot, being in the industry, and from family members that are caring for each other type of thing, asking a lot of questions because they need some navigation around those things. But when along with those questions comes the need for getting approval that it's okay to do this, you have a lot of guilt. So we're giving permission to those that need help, because I think that's very important. But I think as far as supporting each other, when you hear about someone that's struggling, give them permission. And sometimes, in a situation that I have, someone that's been a caregiver for their spouse for about 5 years, 24 hours a day, I'm still working on giving her that permission to feel like it's okay to have someone come in and help them. And she's burnt out, and that's tough. She's doing a great job. But I want things to be easier for her and to get a little bit of respite and to plan for what they need for those cares. But,
Can you imagine the last 5 years of her life and how she spent it? I mean, it's just...
She's aged a lot and it's affected her own health. We all talk about how caregiver burnout, sometimes the caregiver can pass away before the person that they're caring for. But that's a thing that I don't want to forget, of giving each other permission to find an expert, a resource, to go out and do those things. And when you know of resources, share those with people.
Yeah. I think that on the permission level, it's easier for maybe the son or daughter to give them permission. I think they feel more at ease with it versus like the scenario that you just talked with, that a couple's been married 60 years and for her or him to reach out to find help, because it's a generational thing as well too. They are just there to...
It's expected.
Yeah. That's what you do. And so I think that's right. It's kind of like chipping away at it. And sometimes I have not been successful in knowing that the person needs respite, needs help, but can't convince them. But I think for our generation of sons and daughters, and that balancer, that they're willing to get the help. They just need that direction on how to find it.
And the neat thing about, as Andrew mentioned, sometimes when we look at the outcomes, is that these balancers will say, I didn't realize this was really an investment. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes, there's a cost to healthcare and there's a cost to home care, but this was an investment. This was an investment in my parents' health, in their quality of life, an investment in my health. And I was able to continue my career, or, continue to climb the ladder that you were climbing, or that sort of thing. And so that was just a really interesting perspective that one of the families shared with me of looking at it as an investment.
Sure.
Chris, you mentioned earlier collaboration. And I'm curious just to hear from, again, your wide variety of experience, where you feel like you've seen really good collaboration and where you feel like there's still a need for improvement.
I think day to day I see excellent collaboration within, the Lincoln community, the Omaha community. From my background, it's been the collaborative piece from hospital to home, and then home to maybe assisted living, long-term care, and so that kind of that continuum. Now, I think what we sometimes need to do better is communication, with gelling that all together in that communication. I think we've gotten pretty savvy with our software, and how it can speak to each other, so to speak. But yet it's always, we need that kind of that warm transfer of information amongst us that really makes it more successful. And what we need, I think, we need senior mental health. I see a huge need for that, and just like what we've talked about today, everything that we've talked about today kind of leads into the mental health of a senior. And we need to figure that out. The funding stream obviously is a key to that. And then I think more middle of the income, low income housing is crucial in order to keep things going for us.
I think there's a lot of investment in senior living on the upper end when you're thinking of like lifestyle senior living, and when we think about, we'll talk about that a little bit of what we want our own aging to look like, but I can see what you're saying there. There's definitely a lot of options for, if you're able to afford a great community to live in, great places to go. But on those different ranges of the scale, it varies. There's just not as much profit margin for an investor that's building a community like that, especially if you're trying to run a community that's going to be paid for when someone runs out of their own funds.
Yeah, that's right. We've recently at Bridge to Better Living have talked with a couple developers because they're just using us as kind of sounding boards of what we see. What have living communities maybe missed in their design? Where are gaps? Everybody wants to find the gaps, and good for us in senior care and where we might be able to fill those gaps. But you're right. Being able to keep afloat a living community takes a lot, and so it's a matter of the funding stream as well too. Medicare and Medicaid, those dollars are, they're not sustainable dollars all the time, and so that's problematic.
And, they're looking to you not only as an industry expert, but also because it's very obvious that you have such a passion.
Yeah.
And thank you for that, Chris.
You're welcome.
You're such a blessing to so many people.
Thank you,
and
Carla.
just with such a grateful heart, I thank you for being on this show here today. And we've got to end with our question that we're going to ask everybody. Are you ready for this?
I hope so.
Okay. So if you had unlimited resources, Chris, okay, what would you want your golden years to look like?
I think surrounded by family, and people that love me. I don't necessarily think it maybe in my home or in a living community. It's just having, I think, health. Health is extremely important, and it's kind of a cliche, but if you do not have your health, you don't function as well. And so for me, it's being surrounded by family. I certainly could have my children that move out of state. I don't know. They're kind of in those years that they're investigating and graduating and from college and things of that nature. So that kind of gives me a little fear component.
Yeah.
But I would love some amenities too. Don't get me wrong. I would love to have the amenities of a living community as well too. But
what's something in a community that you really like?
I love the idea of having a large fitness center with maybe a pool, and then an active community. Yeah, and so when I want to have solitude, I close the door and have solitude. But when I open up the door, I want it to be a party.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I get that.
Yeah.
Carla, why don't you tell us what your thoughts are? What do you want your golden years to look like? Have you thought about it?
You know, I hate to repeat exactly what you just said, but there's nothing better than being surrounded by the people that you love, you know. But I also, you know, from everything that we're learning in the industry, I definitely want to have a really clear vision and my children to know this is what mom wants, because I don't want to put them in a position that they're stressed or they feel burdened or they feel responsible for making decisions that they're uncomfortable making. So to leave that legacy of peace and harmony, wouldn't that be beautiful for us?
Having that conversation.
Yeah.
You bet. I think that's important. Yeah. What about you, Andrew?
I do like communities that have a lot of amenities. I like a happy hour at a community. That's my type of thing. But when I think about those years, I think that's kind of a time that we get out of that balancer role. I think we focus so much on other people's lives right now with our industry and with our families that we're caring for. When I get to my golden years, it won't quite be that same way. That might be a time that I will finally get to, you know, get things the way that I want them, get to focus on myself, do things that I want to do and like to do. So I don't know the time that I would want to move into a community, but I really like where those communities are trending in the way that when I want to have fun, and as people age, you know, we know this very well. When you age, you don't change as much. You still enjoy friends. You still enjoy, you know, cutting it up, having a good laugh, having a glass of wine, doing those things. Those don't change.
Sure.
And that's something that, you know, is maybe a fearful thing when people say, I don't want to change my life and move or bring in care. You know, if they think, I've got someone in that's in, I just have to make all these changes in my life, which isn't necessarily the way that it is. So
when you're ready to move, you'll call.
Yeah, I would call. I'll be a tough customer. I might have to build my own community to get everything that I want.
We'll probably go on 10 tours with you, Andrew.
Oh,
that's all right. We'll do it.
That'd be a great thing to do.
Hopefully I'm still in the industry.
Oh, that'd be awesome. Well, I hope.
I have a few years on you, Andrew.
I hope
And
that you live to
Carla.
be 120 years old, because if you're still in the industry and taking me on tours, I'll be a young man when I'm moving. But I think that's a time that I look forward to in getting to focus on myself, continue to do things
That's a
that I
good point.
think
That
are
is a
fun.
good point. Those folks in healthcare and in senior healthcare, they give so much. And they don't even know half of what they give. And they go home at night and then they give to their kids and their families. And it's remarkable then to see what they give of themselves. And that is a very good point. Then maybe when retirement hits and you give back to yourself.
And I think with a lot of people, as we focus on careers and you're so busy, you feel like you're not able to be around your kids as much as you want to because you are helping other people and those types of things. And so I'll probably owe my kids some vacations. Need to take care of my health so I can do that.
Do the vacations, right.
They're going to Disney at the age of 30. 40.
No.
There's nothing wrong with Disney at the age of 30.
Wouldn't that be fun? I make them put on the ears and just say, you know,
absolutely.
this is about 20 years too late, but we made it.
That's right.
That'd be a lot of
The journey
fun.
never ends.
The journey never ends. I think that's right. It never ends. It's just how we go through that journey. We need to embrace that journey, and hopefully we all can do that or teach others how to do it.
Amen.
I think you've shared a lot of great knowledge to our audiences. I'm
been great being
looking
here.
forward to, continuing to talk to other industry experts, helping people out.
Good. That's what it's all about.
Yeah.
Thank you for all the strategies that you have
Thanks
shared.
for having
and
me.
thank you to our audience who's been listening and watching today. And we look forward to seeing you again soon.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you again for listening to today's episode of the podcast. If you're listening to the audio version, please feel free to leave a review. And if you're listening to other versions, please like and subscribe. If you'd like to contact us with any questions or things we could help you with that you've learned from today, you can view our contact information in the description below, along with the information of our guest.
Like us on Facebook to learn more about the information we discuss and to connect with other balancers that are listening along with you. And please, feel free to send us any topics or questions you would like us to answer on the show.